Hello, everybody. I'm Steve, and we're here today with the book club and Michael R. Fletcher to talk all things Beyond Redemption. So we'll go around the room really quick and introduce ourselves.
My name's John. My channel name is Hey Y'all Listen Up.
Hey, I'm Michael R. Fletcher, author of Beyond Redemption and some other stuff.
Hi everyone, I am Jolien and I have a channel called Jolien Reads.
And I'm Stacy. My channel is Stacy's All Booked.
Thanks, everyone, for coming by. And, of course, thanks again, Michael, for dropping by to chat with us. I know you're busy, you have a lot of books to write, so I appreciate you taking the time to chat with a bunch of book nerds about your book.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. I love hanging out and doing this sort of stuff.
You know, before we started reading this, I always heard that it's the grimmest of the grimdark, and I thought, well, I don't know, we'll see about that. And it's pretty dark.
Yeah, I know. If you've read, Mark Lawrence has a post where he sort of gets readers to vote on books as to what he's sort of nailing down exactly what grimdark is. And last I saw, I think Beyond Redemption is still sitting as like the grimdarkest grimdark book, which is funny because when I wrote it, I had never heard of grimdark, like never heard the term. I was like, it's dark fantasy, and it wasn't until my agent at the time said something like, "Oh, the grimdark crowd are gonna love this." Sent me off Googling, trying to figure out what she was talking about.
Even if as dark as it is, there's a lot of humor mixed in, though. So there's breaks. It's not all dreary and bad, but it was a nice break.
Yeah, I agree. You have that part with, we can talk spoilers, right?
Yeah, let's go for
it. So we have that part with the guards. I really like that because that's super funny where you have the two of them, like we didn't see anything. And that gives you a little bit of breathing space because everything else is pretty dark and depressing. But then these little parts in between really lift spirits up for a while.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't really plan stuff like that. I don't put any thought into pacing per se. But I think, when I'm writing, by the time I hit that sort of stage, when you've been wallowing in that darkness for so long, like, hopefully it works. But, just as a writer, I wanted a break. I wanted something silly in there. And I had this idea for these two characters. And, every time I sort of actually stopped to think about it, I'm like, this has nothing to do with the book. Like, why am I putting this in there? And I just figured at some point the editor would be like, all right, this is pointless. Like, cut this crap out. But everyone was kind of like, yeah, okay, yeah, that stays. All right. Kind of surprised.
What did you think, John?
Yeah, I liked it. I'm not really a big grimdark reader. This is I'm reading through Black Company right now. That's really my only experience with grimdark, and I did enjoy it. I like the Cult of the Dead Cat. That was a good part, a funny part of it.
Stacy, what are your thoughts?
I really liked it. If nothing else, it is incredibly unique. The writing was so easy to read, despite there being a complex world here, and I really liked that. So many characters, but yet each one was distinctive. And God, man, they went from really liking some of the characters to just really disgusted some of them. And to draw that kind of emotion from the reader really says a lot about the writing.
And they're slowly read, and he's one of the reasons I wanted to read the book. We're watching his review and watching the interview with you, Michael. So
yeah, he's a
yes, Cahern,
a mad grimdark fan. He's very much a champion of the genre or subgenre or whatever it is.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's how I found out about the book, was when Mark did his review on it.
And I have to ask, because this world and the magic and the powers, and how did this idea start to kind of brew for you as you were getting ideas together for this book? Because it's so unique and different that I wondered how did you kind of start developing these?
The very sort of like the germ of the idea was a little weird. So I used to work as an audio engineer, recording like mostly live bands, but I did studio recordings and worked as a live audio engineer, mixing rock bands and stuff. And I was doing an album with a Toronto band called Dirty Penny, and they had a song called Atahualpa, which is basically about the conflict between the Spanish conquistadors and Emperor Atahualpa, you know, in the Incan Empire. And the song spun the conflict as sort of more of a war of worldviews rather than it being like spears versus muskets and you know, whatever flu was wiping them out. And that kind of stuck in me. Yeah, I had this idea about uh, how people seeing the world, you know, sort of shaping the world. And I wrote a short story, sort of playing with the idea, trying to figure out how that would work. So I wrote a short story, Fire and Flesh, which is basically that Francesco Pizarro, the conquistador, his interaction with Emperor Atahualpa. And that was like the genesis of it, and sort of realizing that you know, if you have a reality that's shaped by belief, then like who's going to be the most powerful? Who's going to be the wizard in that world? And it was like, oh, the crazy people. Like the more strongly you can believe something, the more capable you are of shaping that reality. So if you get somebody who's absolutely broken, just completely like their understanding of reality is completely shattered, and they can absolutely with total sincerity believe insane things, then they become sort of more powerful. And then there were sort of other aspects spun off of that, like how many people believe something, that influences reality as well. So if you can convince like an entire city of people that something is true, just the sheer weight of belief kind of starts making it true. And at the time, like politics going on and whatnot, it really clicked for me. You know, you look at the tendency of sociopaths to be drawn to like politics or, you know, positions of power, police force kind of stuff. So really, it was like a very simple idea that just completely spun out of control.
Can I pause? Is it just me, or is everybody having trouble hearing Michael? I just want to make sure that who's watching can hear what he's saying.
I can
Is it
turn
just
up
me?
my mic if you want.
Yeah, if you can turn it up just a little bit.
Sure.
I don't know if it's just I have bad ears, so
How's
if it's
that?
just me, I'll put them. Yes, much
That's better.
Yes,
All right, cool.
All those rock concerts, Stacy.
it is. You know me. So what you were saying about your idea and how you came up with it. I've read other books where a god is stronger based on the number of believers they have. I think American Gods by Neil Gaiman kind of did something like that. But this was so neat because they're literally creating a god based on making people believe. I just thought that was so cool. And this whole book, the magic system and the premise is very cool, very well done. So a lot of times you see people say, oh, you know what, I'm just going to do this because nobody else has done it. It's not necessarily done well. This is unique and done well. I enjoyed the whole story. I can't wait to read the next book. I don't know about the rest of you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think some of the magic system, the insanity based stuff, that part of why it works is because of like my background, like growing up as a kid, my entrance into fantasy was all role playing, Dungeons and Dragons, that kind of stuff, right? So to me, magic always had rules. And so, you know, before I started writing the book, I spent a lot of time researching various mental disorders. And so I basically wrote this stuff out as if I was creating a world book for, you know, a very messed up Dungeons and Dragons campaign. So there very much is a defined magic system. And, you know, so if it makes sense and sort of seems very cohesive and thought out, it's weirdly because it is.
The rules make sense, though. I mean, if you think about mental illness, it derives from somewhere. Usually, there's a point in a person's life where it kind of blossoms from, and a lot of the characters that you have that have, particular powers that are based on their disorder, I guess you could call it. It comes from somewhere. I mean, even the slaver has a backstory. So you kind of, at some point, you're like, yeah, I know you're disgusting, but now I kind of understand you a little bit. So it just was so cool.
Cool. Yeah, book 2, I won't say anything about that, but that is much more a character book. I think book 1 was me trying to get the idea out there and get the idea right, and then book 2 was for me was much more like locking into sort of individual characters and getting a little closer in there.
Mhm. Do we actually follow the same characters in book 2, or is it just in the same world but a completely different story?
Yep, same characters. So the Mirror's Truth basically starts like a week or 2 after Beyond Redemption ends.
Okay, interesting.
That's going to be interesting considering most of the cast is dead.
Well, they're still around.
Yeah.
And I like that there's this belief system, and everyone says, "Do you really believe that this is what's going to happen?" And no one was like, "Well, I don't know. That's what they tell us, but I don't know what's." I guess it just depends on what you believe and what's around you at the time. And so I like that everyone's kind of like, I believe it, but I don't know why. Yeah, it's just kind of.
Well,
Yeah,
isn't that
also
true?
I also found it interesting that you can actually die in the after death.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And what is after? Is there an after death?
Yeah.
I liked that line in there. That was one of the things I liked, Michael, is kind of the little quotes at the beginning of each chapter from just random people. I liked that. And it always, kind of tied into the chapter.
Yeah, those were a lot of fun to write, and very much like a break for me from like the actual like plot side stuff, because I mean there'd be days where I'd sit there trying to think up some like bizarre quote that would make sense and hopefully click in some way. Sometimes they just fall out, and sometimes you just sit there staring at the computer for hours going, come on, brain.
And Koenig's powers and his it was so unique, and it took me a minute to kind of understand what was happening with his different parts of his personality, but that was so bonkers and so unique that it's crazy. It was really really great seeing the different personalities, and he knew how to play them. He knew what they're because they were all different parts of his personality, and when they kind of plot against him, he knew how to find out which one was plotting against him.
Mhm.
And Lauren mentioned, I'm gonna butcher every name in this book, so just a heads up. But Wichtig's internal dialogue in book 2 was so entertaining to read.
I can't wait to get there. I did listen to the audiobook because I was having a really hard time with the names. So at first he was just W.
Yeah, that whole German thing, that was probably a mistake. Like when I wrote that book, like I didn't have an agent, didn't have a publishing deal. I wrote it thinking like 4 or 5 of my sort of closest friends would probably be the only people on the planet to ever read it. So for me, I was just none of them speak German, so I'm like, sweet German. I'll hide like little Easter eggs in there, like clues as to like characters or stuff like that, little hints and basically little Easter eggs, and really just did it for fun and to entertain myself. Because it never occurred to me that the book would actually like sell. And then the publisher just left all that stuff in, and now I get occasional hate mail from German speaking people, and I'm like, just go buy the translation, it's out there. Don't read the English one, you're gonna hate that.
I liked it. I thought it was unique. It added to the uniqueness of the story.
Yeah, I thought the sound of the German sort of suited the feel that I was going for.
And one of my biggest gripes in fantasy and is all the names are really can be really similar, so it's hard to tell who's who. And we've chatted about this before, but I didn't have that problem in this book because they were all very unique names, and even though I couldn't pronounce many of them, I still knew who was who.
At some point, I should listen to the audiobook. I haven't actually. They sent me the files. I haven't listened to it. I'll be honest. I am curious how he pulled off all those horrendous German words.
He did a good job, I thought, but I don't speak German, so I don't know.
Yeah, I know. I've heard other audiobooks he's done. He's a fantastic narrator. I haven't heard what he did with this.
Yeah, I already bought the audiobook for the second book. I definitely want to hear him narrate it. It was good.
Yeah, cool.
So what did you think of the characters, Yolene? What were your thoughts on the characters?
Well, I'm a super character-driven reader in general, so I was actually very happy that all of them have a backstory and that it makes sense, but also that the magic that they have makes sense with the personality. But I think that I liked Gehirne most, so the one who can work with fire. Because for me, even though she might not be the most powerful, I think that König is the most powerful, but he doesn't seem really insane. He has those doubles and stuff like that, but he knows that that's abnormal and he's also afraid of them. While Gehirne, she's really completely insane. And I feel, for instance, she's afraid of the sun and she gets burned because she really fears it. And I really like that she has those abnormal tendencies and you don't really understand why. But then when her backstory comes into place, everything all of a sudden fits. So I liked her most of all, especially how she ended and how she still tried to protect the godchild. I really liked that touch.
Yeah, I totally agree with Yolene that I liked her character a lot too. But I also really liked the dynamic of the trio and how they liked and disliked each other at the same time.
Yeah, they were a lot of fun to write. They're bickering and the sort of the interplay between the three of them, and that was a lot of fun. They're probably the most fun to write of all the groups there.
John, what were your thoughts on the characters?
Yeah, I think my favorite character was Bedak. I guess he's more the standard fantasy hero type, but I really enjoyed watching Borg grow up because you really get to see him kind of, once he gets out of the temple and starts figuring out how the world actually works, he starts to learn and kind of figure things out. That was an interesting growth for him.
One of the parts that I thought was really hilarious was when Stahl goes into the temple and she's trying to steal the clothing so they can sneak in and kidnap Morgan. And she goes and kills all these. She just ends up killing everybody, and she goes back. So, well, how many people did you kill? And she just kills everybody. So those little moments in there, it was dark humor, but it was still very funny. And Slowly Red mentioned the boiling around her feet was awesome to imagine heat waves emanating off of her.
Yeah, and she seemed to the further you got after she was under the spell, if you will, of the slaver, like she was really having this internal struggle, and it seemed like everybody that was under his power had kind of knew what was happening to them, but they couldn't do anything about it, and that's why they all kind of wished for death. But her internal struggle, I think, is what ultimately helped her break free. She didn't really break free until he was dead, but she was able to kind of withstand it a little bit, which allowed the deck to get to the slaver. But I really liked her character because she knew what she wanted, but she couldn't control herself. And it was almost like being under the power of her father again. And I think that's why she hated him and loved him at the same time. It was I really thought her character had a lot to it.
I didn't think about that with her father. But the slaver was.
I think it look into everything. I overanalyze a lot.
Was that intentional, Michael, to have that parallel?
Yeah, oh, very much so. Like a lot, um, especially with the really the main sort of characters. I kind of had to go in with like a very sort of defined idea of what was driving them. The tricky part with writing basically a cast of insane characters is the temptation for it to be just like chaos and now nothing has to make sense kind of thing. It's like, oh, they're crazy. It doesn't matter what they do. But I very much want each insanity to be uh, to work within itself. So like they're consistent. They're insane, consistently insane in the same way. They don't have sort of magical powers where they can do anything. The swordsman, really all he can do is talk people into believing that he's a really great swordsman. And the thief is she's a kleptomaniac. That's kind of really, and she's craving punishment, but still needs to steal. So yeah, there's a lot of sort of a background thought into the what makes these characters tick and what's going to sort of drive who they are.
And
So
Dark
I'm
Po-
curious. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Dark Potence just mentioned. I know that guy talking about the greatest swordsman in the world. I'm sorry, Stacy. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask John. He said that he really liked the deck, and I was wondering what he thought about how he and he could have gone away and just left everything, left Morgan, and but he was so he was inclined to save him, and so the things that he did, kind of in the end of the book. What did you think about that?
Yeah, I did like the end how it worked because we did have the scene where the deck just he threw his axe at the person who changed him to a bear, and then he just ran. So we had that scene earlier, and so we know he's capable of running away. But yeah, the way that they set it up where the deck did have to go, and of course he disguised himself in the slavers as one of his kind of crew, and then went there and kind of got it to where he could get Morgan away from Yahern in time to not be burned up. So I did enjoy that part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And the slaver was awesome, but man, such an awesome character. But man, it's terrifying at the same time. Just the power he has to just a whole city or a little village with their gates and their guards, and he's just like, yeah, you love me, and you need me, and come on, let's go. And
Yeah.
just awful.
Yeah, that's a disgusting character.
Yeah.
I've seen some fan art, and
Oh.
yeah, it's like a human personified Jabba the Hutt. It's pretty bad, but it works because that's exactly how I pictured him. Ugh.
Yeah.
But that's what made him so intriguing, because he was so physically disgusting, and yet all these people were just. It showed you how powerful he was, that he could literally just look like anything and do anything and be as gross as he wanted, and everybody would still just love him.
And the stew.
Oh God.
Sometimes I wonder what the heck's going on in that brain. Really? Like, where did that come from?
And David says disgusting characters are always fun.
Was that fun to write?
Oh yeah, I mean the book was it was a zero pressure book for me, like because I didn't think it was going to sell or didn't think anyone would read it. I just got to do whatever I wanted. Not that I don't get to now, but it was that was the first book. So it was the second book I ever wrote, but the first book that I wasn't sort of trying to write like somebody else. It was the first time where I went, okay, I'm just gonna write whatever I want. I'm not copying anybody else's style. I'm just gonna like throw myself into this story and whatever feels like it sort of needs to be there, whatever should happen, however I want to describe things. And I like, I honestly, I don't know. Like, some of it, yeah, it's got to be, it's kind of purple. Like, I think sometimes maybe it's pushing the boundaries of what's sort of acceptable in terms of, descriptive stuff. But at the same time, I totally don't care. It was great to just sort of go, okay, I'm going to write my book.
I never felt like the prose was overdone.
Oh, that's good. I mean, hopefully it's not, but I just like I can't tell. I read my stuff and I'm like,
Well, they say you're your own worst critic, right?
oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't think it was overdone either. At all. Koenig, I liked him because he knew his limits. So he knew he couldn't get too powerful, or he had to get what he had to. He knew that he had to get Morgan. He had to kill Morgan and have him in the afterlife before he was too powerful. So there's these big, disgusting, powerful characters that can warp reality, but they can't become too powerful because then they kind of collapse on themselves. So there's a limit. Otherwise, if there's no limits, then they can just become, there's just gods everywhere.
Yeah.
Was that something that you did on purpose?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, with the whole D&D side of the magic system stuff, power always has to come with a price, be it magic or otherwise. So I very much wanted a magic system that cost something. There was a price to using it, and there were limits on, sort of how powerful you could get. Or in this case, not quite how powerful, but how useful it was when you got really powerful. Because when your insanity peaked and you were capable of the most unbelievable mind-bending, reality-twisting feats, you were also no longer sane enough to decide what you were doing. You sort of went over the pinnacle and you lost everything.
Yolene, who was your favorite character?
Well, I think so. I really like Gehern, and then the slaver, the combination, because I think the moment that I was the most disgusted was when Gehern was telling about her trauma, and then you have the slaver saying like, "I'm actually almost jealous. You're the lucky one because you were loved," and that shows a lot about how broken he is. I think he might be one of the most broken characters in the whole premise of the book, and that also explains why he's the most disgusting one of the lot. So I think that I really like that interaction. On the other hand, I also liked Konig's part where you have his reflection, I think, all of a sudden taking power, because you're always afraid of the doppels and you think that something is going to happen there. And then all of a sudden it's his reflection. So it's completely unexpected, but it makes sense. Because sometimes a book is unexpected, but it's because it's not logical what's happening. And here it's logical, you just didn't think about it yourself. So I really liked that part.
Yeah, there were some good twists in the end. What happened with Morgan too. Same thing happened, was his reflections tricked him, and so it makes you think. I might have to put something on my mirrors here.
Don't get too close to them.
No.
John, what was your favorite character?
Bedak.
Oh, that's right. He seems like the most grounded, kind of. He's broken, but he's more broken physically than he is, with trauma.
They kept calling him, or he called himself even, the most sane of the insane. And maybe I missed it, or it was too subtle. But did he have like some kind of power, or is he just a normal?
Book 2.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all I can say is book 2. Okay.
Because I know his rage is what protected him when he was against the slaver, and I was wondering if that was part of his thing, but I couldn't remember, because he spent the good first half of the book sick, and so he wasn't really much good to anybody. And until Morgan saved him, he didn't really get to see, like, he's supposedly this killer. They were like, well, he just kills people, kind of like I don't even know how to pronounce her name, but the female of the trio.
Is it Stahl or
I don't know.
Yeah, Stalin the thief.
Stalin?
I don't speak German, so I don't want to.
Yeah, I don't. I couldn't
No
tell
idea
you.
how to pronounce any of it.
You have the power of snot.
You know what's funny is when I started reading it, I have allergies really bad in the summer, so I tend to have days where I'm like that. And so I'm reading it, I'm like, God, it's so gross to read it. Is that what it looks like to people? And I'm just like, hold on a second.
You know, I wondered if in writing this book, if you the idea behind religion in our world kind of was kind of an inspiration. You know, um, the fanatics, the fanatical side of religion. If that was kind of an inspiration for the like the slaver or other characters in the book, was that part of kind of where your mind was when you wrote those characters in the story?
Yep. Yeah. So very much so, like organized religion, politics. The books, for me, so it doesn't mean that other people will get the same thing from it, and that's fine. But I always have a theme in mind for every book when I'm writing, and for this one, it was very much about what I would call like the delusions of the sane, which is the weird stuff that we believe in, and without kind of any real evidence, without proof. And that, if you actually are willing to step back and look at it, you go like, maybe that's kind of dumb. And I don't want to attack anything like the people believe. That's not at all what I'm about. But there's a lot in there, like, and politics, as much as anything. I mean, you look at like the last bunch of years. It's been a bit strange bunch of years in a pile of different countries. And yeah, so Beyond Redemption is very much a sort of influenced by what's what you see, what I saw going on in churches, politics, economics, like anywhere you sort of see sociopaths, you know, uh, driven to power or pursuing power. Um, the For me, the sociopaths were the sort of like that's what started the book. Was wanting to play with that idea with what's a sociopath like in a world where belief defines reality.
I think for some people, and regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, you can be on either side or in the middle. Or I think now it is. I think, like you mentioned, politics is more of a. It's almost like a cult, like a religion that is on either side. So that's where my mind went when I was reading the story, and especially the slaver, that he kind of grows in power as more people follow him. So that's where my mind went. Is it might just be because of the climate now, and it may not have been when you wrote it, but that's where my mind went.
I totally agree, Steve. I agree, Steve. Also about how distance mattered too, right? He had to constantly um, be within their sight where he could control them, and that's very similar to politics today. Is you always have to have the media or somebody talking in your ear to remind you. It kind of reminded me a lot as I was reading this book about cognitive dissonance. Despite what your eyes see, your beliefs are so strong that you don't believe what you see, right? And then it almost you negate what the reality because your belief is so strong, you've now changed reality to suit your beliefs. I just thought that was so interesting. And it goes beyond just mental illness. It's something I think all humans struggle with. Is if you have a strong belief, it's really hard to break that belief, and to be in a world where your delusions become real. I just thought that was really cool because it almost makes it impossible to change somebody's mind. Somebody's got a squeaker.
Yeah. And I think even we can even take it a step further. And I think for some people, when they are that far, when they're so invested in something and they become kind of this, I don't want to say a sheep, but their reality does become whatever they're listening to, whether it's politics or religion or whatever, they become in their own mind. Not they can't affect the rest. Well, they can sometimes affect the rest of us, but in their mind, they are. Their reality does warp in a sense when they're so far, when they don't think for themselves and they're just blindly following whatever it may be, whatever idea or ideology it is. That's kind of where yeah. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I thought a nice touch was when the deck comes back to that city after a 30-year absence, the city where the temple is. He notices how much more prosperous it is than it was 30 years ago. And it was sheerly because of Connick's belief that the city needed to be a prosperous city. And, everybody just kind of fell in line with that.
Mhm.
Yeah, that was one of the points in the book where I was like, well, maybe this Koenig guy isn't so bad, because if his beliefs were so horrible, they were based on selfishness, mind you, but he had turned a city, and like you said, being very much more prosperous. The people were happier. They had something to believe in. It makes you wonder about, like you were saying, Michael, politics and sociopaths kind of go one in the same. But hey, Ashley.
Peanut butter and jelly. Did that cross your mind, Yulene, as you were reading with the parallels there?
Yeah, well, there's one thing that I wanted to ask, which is weirdly specific. But so you have the Zodiac killer in real life, and he says, well, in one of his letters, that he actually kills people because then they will be his slaves in the after death, which is very specific to this book as well. So I wanted to know if that's an influence of yours that you had, or if it's complete coincidence.
Yeah. So did he actually use the term after death? That
I should go check. It's after death or afterlife,
right?
which probably
yeah,
second.
it definitely wasn't based on the Zodiac killer. For me, that was more. There are several different tribes who have, believed that your enemies, those you vanquish in battle, serve you in the afterlife after death. You know, the pharaohs would have, servants and animals buried with them to serve them, beyond the grave. So it really was just sort of riffing on that idea. And I like the idea of, always making sure you had some coin tucked away in your boots in case you got killed, so you didn't show up in the afterlife broke. And you have a couple of weapons on you, hidden away. Just you don't want to show up sort of unarmed and poor. So these people spend their life in this already sort of like shitty environment, worrying about how bad it's going to be after they die.
Yep. Yeah, that's one of the things that I also liked. I think it's when Wichtig dies that he's checking his boots because he knows that he has money there, and then it's like, I know.
Yeah. That was a while ago. That's right. Yeah, he'd been robbed, right?
Yeah.
I think she took all his coin. He's like, oh.
And no one ever gets upset with her. It's kind of like, and it's like, well, she can't help it.
Well, at least she paid for stuff, so.
Hey,
Well,
with their money.
Yeah, with their money, yeah.
She's kind of like a bank. I really liked her character, but she was a broken woman.
Yeah. And with Connick, I'm not sure if I was just slow to catch on, but I did not catch on with Connick's plan about is it Morgan? Am I pronouncing that right? With him ascending, he had to die, and it didn't even cross my mind that Connick he wanted Morgan to serve him in the after death. I didn't catch on to that until later in the book, but it was like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. It took me a little bit to figure that out. But he was such a great character that he had he thought he had everything figured out. And he was trying to, it felt like the time was running out for him, and he knew it, and he wanted to get everything done before it was too late. It didn't work out too well for him, but
yeah, I tend to shy away from like purely good or purely evil characters. Both mostly the fairly boring. The slaver is the closest to there being someone who is like purely evil. But even he, not quite redeeming qualities, but there was other stuff going on in his background. But someone like Koenig, yeah, he would have been a force for civilization. He would have, he wanted, cities. He wanted the rule of law. He wanted, a system of politics and economy. So he probably would have improved the lives of many people.
Mhm.
And,
Yeah, I think that's what made that part of the story so interesting. Is you were kind of his character was open for you, so you knew what was driving him. You knew that he was doing all these things purely selfishly because of the nature of his insanity, but yet the outcomes of his actions were good for society. So you're kind of, as a reader, you feel a little torn when you're thinking of him. What is he? Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? And you really feel that way about all the characters, right? They all have flaws that kind of make you go, I shouldn't like this person. I know I shouldn't, but part of me really cares for them and is rooting for them as a character. And even, like I said, the slaver, even with him, you're so disgusted by him, but you understand where he comes from. And it's really hard to fully hate him the way you would. I mean, it kind of reminded
It's
me
pretty bad.
of Darth Vader. Throughout the first movie, you don't like him. He's a purely evil villain. By the second movie, you're starting to just there's more to him than we understand. And then the third movie, you're like, damn it, maybe he's not all bad.
So, John, what did you think of the After Death?
It was, I guess, interesting. I don't know that I have a strong feeling about it one way or the other. I mean, like I said earlier, I did find it interesting that you could actually die after that. That was a fact that I wouldn't have expected otherwise. And I did like that. Was it Wigtig actually killed him, the slaver, just as soon as he showed up? Like, okay, that was cool.
I wasn't expecting that at all. I thought he was going to have more. There was going to be more to him in the after death, so it was kind of neat.
Maybe there is more.
Than the after death.
How many layers are there?
It's like Inception.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought about as how many, or even like a purgatory type of thing where there's, layers of it. Where does it end? I liked when they got to the after death, they kind of had their the people who were serving them, and they were kind of comparing. Well, you have a much better chance, because you were killing all these swordsmen all these years, and I have a bunch of scraps. So that was one of those other funny moments.
Priests.
Yeah. And Stahl was waiting for him to get there, and at the end, are you going to release me? And he's like, well, when I know you're not going to kill me, I'll think about it. This weird friendship when they all hated each other to know each other, but they really cared for each other.
Yeah. Dysfunctional family.
Definitely. So, Michael, we talked a little bit before we went live, but did you always plan this to be a trilogy, or did you just kind of wing it and see what's going to happen, or did you have a plan for how many books?
So the first book, well, like I said, I had no expectation of it ever selling or being published. And back then, so I wrote this in 2009. I don't know if self-publishing was really even around back then, or if anyone was doing it. Certainly, I'd never heard of it. So it was either it would get picked up or it would just disappear, which is what I thought would happen. So my intent was to write, some more books in that world. Thought maybe 2 or 3 total. When Harper Voyager picked up Beyond Redemption, I got a little carried away and was like, yay, I'm going to be like this super famous fantasy author. That's amazing. So then I wrote the sequel because the book was landing like amazing reviews, like critically really well received. And so I was like, well, for sure they're going to pick up, book 2, and then I'll write a third book. And then it just didn't sell that well. The reviews were good, but it was never like a hit for sales, and so it wasn't selling enough for them to be interested in the sequel. And by that time, that was 2016, because I'd already written the sequel, and self-publishing was sort of a thing at that point. I was like, well, I've written it, I might as well put it out. Really didn't expect anything to come of it, because I'm like, no one's heard of me, no one's buying this other book. But it really just it sort of set everything in motion. That everything that came afterwards, the other books, the other series, all spun out of that sort of like, I might as well put it out, idea. But yeah, there should be, actually trying to answer your question now, there should be one last book, but it's going to be a little while before I get to it.
Yeah, we are reading Mira's Truth next month. So I'm trying to not get into it early so I can save it. But
I know I'm trying not to either. The ending.
Yeah. What did you think of the ending?
For people who didn't know or don't know that there's a sequel, they think this is it because it's the only book that I can find at the bookstore, because it's the only one that's published traditionally.
What did you think of the ending, John?
I liked it. It was definitely it obviously leads you to the next book. But here again, the whole sequence of the ending, I thought was, a pretty clever sequence of events. I did kind of wonder why Morgan would release Wigtook, from serving him. And I find the idea of a god beholden to someone else too.
Yelene,
he
what
had
did you
no
think?
choice, right? It was, if he died, he would either be Gahern or the slaver. So I liked that that's what had to happen. There's just so many things that could have. It was one of those books where you're like, I really don't know where this is going. And you have all these ideas that could happen, and they're all based on your experience with other fantasy. And so it always surprises me when something totally unexpected comes out, because honestly, I've read a lot of books. So you would think that I wouldn't be surprised as much as anymore as I have been. So I was very pleasantly surprised with how that came, because I kept thinking he's going to heal himself. I mean, he healed Bedecked. He saved, or brought Wishta back from the dead. So he's going to heal himself. No.
Oh, what happens to him? Oh, that's awful.
It was awful.
That was awful. Yelene, what did you think?
I actually really liked that Morgan, he starts as a really pure person, probably the only one in the entire book. And then when he goes outside, because of everybody else, he gets tainted. And then in the end, he actually pulls power towards himself with making a new empire, but then really driven by a god. But on the other hand, there isn't really anyone else that he can give this power to, because you have König, but he can see that it's not really König and that he's also not really the right person. So I can understand that he pulls all of that power towards himself. But on the other hand, I'm really wondering if he remains more or less pure and what he will do next. But then also, of course, you have Bedecked, who is the only sane person. So he will give a little bit of structure, I guess. But on the other hand, what I really like is that, so Bedecked is the only sane one. But if you live in a world where, your belief structures reality, is it really insanity? Because it's reality. So isn't Bedecked the only one who's actually not really
or insane?
So I really like that twist, and you keep thinking about it, like what's actually true here.
I'm a little bit concerned about Morgan, considering he says he wants to scour the world and make it clean again. That's Sounds vengeful to me. More of an avenging god than a truly, peaceful, pure god. And we'll see. So I guess we'll find out in the next book, I imagine.
Hmm.
But
So your expectations are low for Morgan.
yeah, I hope that Bedecked will be able to kind of rein him in, if you will, with lack of a different term. But based on what Morgan says in the end about how his OCD, if you will,
Hmm.
is going to maybe drive him to do things I think that might be considered by some a little bit extreme. We'll see, though. But I mean, the world doesn't seem very clean to me, so I imagine there's not going to be a whole lot that would survive that.
Is that what this world needs, though?
I don't know. Maybe that's why there is an after death. I have a feeling a lot of book 2 is going to take place there. We'll see.
A big part of what I loved about the world in the background is the idea that humanity shapes their environment, with their will, and so the world is what they make it, and it's this hell. Like it could conversely, just as easily, it could be a heaven of sorts.
Mhm.
But apparently, I might have been in a slightly dark place at the time when I wrote that, and that is not what I thought humanity would do with that power.
Well, what would humanity do with those kind of powers? I don't know.
That's why
I
it
don't
felt
have a
so
lot of faith.
real. I think, I don't know about the rest of you, but I think that that's what none of us are pure people. We all strive to be that way, or most of us do. But for the most part, people are flawed. They're very gray characters. And so with that kind of power, you're going to end up, on all of the some very extreme, some very moderate, and you have that here in this world. There are people who have these powers and they go to the extreme. For the most part, I don't know if you guys remember, there's a line in The Matrix where he talks about, like, originally the Matrix was a utopia, but people kept trying to wake up from it because it felt like a dream. I just think that we reality is, we talk about when you pinch yourself to see if it's real. We associate reality with pain and suffering, and so, if you're going to create a reality, it's going to be part of yourself, and that's exactly what it is, right? These realities are a delusion, something that's conjured by the person, and not everybody is pure. Most people are not. That's why it feels so real. Otherwise we'd read it and go, that would never happen.
And it seems like there's a lot more stories to be told in this world. There's a lot of potential in this world you've created.
Yep, and that was so Swarm and Steel is a standalone set in the same world, different part of the world, but still in the city states there, and that I just wanted to do something completely different from the sort of the first 2 books. Just wanted to play with some new delusions, move it to a different part of the world, just so I can play in some different environments and stuff. So that one gets more into what the desert tribes in the Far East believe, and how their beliefs manifest differently than what's going on in the city states, and then sort of crashing those ideas together.
Wow.
Cool.
That sounds awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Can't wait to read the next one.
It's a romance between a cannibal and a corpse.
Oh my goodness.
Actually, not even kidding. It totally is.
I believe you. Yeah. That's why it's funny.
Oh my goodness.
You have a question, Stacy?
I was just wondering, I think Michael's the first author that we've spoken to that's been both traditionally and self-published. And I'm wondering if you can give us any insight into what the process of the two, how they differ and what you prefer.
Okay. So, I mean, speed, self-publishing stuff is way faster. So like with something like Beyond Redemption, so I wrote it in 2009. I shopped it to agents first, so that takes a long time. I landed an agent with it, then the agent shopped it to publishers. That takes time. We had offers from a couple of different publishers. Um, we finally narrowed it down to Harper Voyager. Um, Contract stuff that takes time. Then the book went to their editor. So I wrote that in 2009. It was released in 2015. So that gives you an idea. Now it's not always that slow, but typically there's always dead minimum a year wait. Like even with somebody who's writing books in a signed trilogy, it's not going to hit the shelves for a year and a half after they've written it. So patience, not one of my virtues. So that breaks me. Like I just go fucking mental, waiting for shit to happen. Like it drives me crazy. I'm just not good at that. Conversely, the self-publishing side, I'm in control of everything. So I hire the artist, I hire the editor. I can, if I can write a book, typically I can write a first draft in 3 months. I spend 3 more months polishing it, making it not as much of a turd. And then, after that, it's a couple of months of sort of prep to get it out. But I can easily publish a book like once every 9 months if I sort of like really push myself. Probably faster if I wanted. But like it moves at my pace. There's always stuff happening, and I'm in control of everything. Like I choose the artist. I work with the artist on the cover. So there's never a cover where I'm not happy with it. Whereas with the traditionally published stuff, you really, if you're lucky, the publisher might say, "Hey, do you like this?" And if you say no, they're probably not going to do anything about it, but they might. You never know. Whereas like I don't love all my published covers, especially like I hate to say it, but those audiobook covers, like the audiobook cover for the second one, like what the fuck? Anyway,
I forget what
but the self-published stuff,
To look at it.
like I get I can work with the artist I want, assuming I'm willing to pay them, and they're not cheap. But I love it. The traditional stuff, you get this nice fat advance, and you're like, yay, you're flush for a little while. But with the self-published stuff, like every month, money is coming in, and so that makes life a lot. Yeah, the beaver. That makes life a lot easier. So right now, like self-publishing has been really good to me. So for the foreseeable future, I'm going to be a self-published author because it's working. I have a career, which is weird to say. Whereas with the traditional stuff, like if I write something and want to shop it, I have to write it and then wait a year or two for things to happen before it starts generating income. Whereas I kind of really liking what I'm doing.
Did you get any strange looks after Beyond Redemption went to the agent and the editor? Or did they stop replying to your emails for a while after that?
No, actually, everyone was really great to work with. Like the folks at Harper Voyager, I worked with David Pamerico. I'm probably butchering his name. Worked with David at Harper. He was my editor. Like awesome dude, amazing editor. Everyone was really good. It just the book didn't sell. It's what it is, and the why, who knows. But it's ticking away. Every now and then, it seems people seem to notice it again. So I don't know if it's a sleeper, and at some point in the future, they'll be like, oh hey, overnight success with this book that was written 10 years ago.
Yeah. Does your writing process change when it's traditionally published versus self? Do you censor yourself at all, or kind of hold back?
No.
When it's,
no. I don't censor myself at all. it's always I write whatever I want to write. My writing process has changed, but not because of self-publishing. It's more like it's constantly evolving as I try new things. So Beyond Redemption, I had the scene at the very end in mind before I started writing. So the first thing I had was the name. I was at work, depressed as hell, and I was like, I'm going to write a fantasy book where every single character is beyond redemption. There's no good guys. There's no pretty characters. Everyone's yucky and everything's yucky. And I'm just going to write this dark as fuck book. And so it was Beyond Redemption, and I was like, oh, this is how it's going to end. And then I just wrote it and managed to kind of end up where I wanted. After that, I started planning a little bit more because it's really hard to do to write a book where you kind of have no idea what's going on through the entire time. So if you were surprised by a turn of events, I probably was too at the time. It was often, the characters, because I didn't have a plan, I wasn't forced to follow a plot line. And so if one insane character was like, I want to do this, and charged off to the left, it was kind of like, oh, okay, shit. All right, off we go. And so like, I'd write myself into corners, and then I'd have to stop writing for a week or two while I tried to figure out for the character, how are they going to get themselves out of this stupid situation they've blindly run into, So now I plan things a little bit more. I do a skeletal plot 3 chapters at a time. So plan 3 chapters, write 3 chapters, plan the next 3. So I'm still leaving myself a lot of room for experimenting and wandering off on tangents and whatnot. So I like it. I don't want a story to feel planned. Like if you're ever like, oh, this is how this is going to go, and it's predictable, and you're like, he's the good guy and he's got all this plot armor and nothing can touch him. It's like, nah, I'll kill him. I don't mind.
I always think it's interesting when authors talk about how a character kind of takes over its own story. And I just think that you hear it enough, it's got to be true, right? I believe it's true. So it is. But
Yeah, for sure.
When we're reading the characters, especially when they're well written, they feel real to us. And so it's always cool to hear authors talk about how those characters pretty much wrote their own story. Because then it just, the process feels so much cooler than they're like, yeah, I planned this and I wrote it. So
yeah,
I just love hearing that.
It's fun. Like the scene with the trio, and they ran into the not the undead, the shapeshifters, and my thought was like, basically there's going to be this great sort of anti-hero moment where they just run away. And except the swordsman pulls his swords and charges into battle, and it's like, what? No, no, that's not the plan. Benedict is like, no, fuck this, I'm out of here. He bolts, and it's like, the characters have split up and run off in different directions, and I'm like, okay, well, like, dude, what's your plan? Like, how do you think you're gonna sort of beat these people? And I'm like, oh, you're not gonna, you're gonna die here. And I was like, okay, that's your fault.
That's so cool. That scene was really neat because it really, the character, they did exactly what made sense for them. Mm-hmm. And it didn't feel forced. It didn't feel like, it was organic. It felt like a very organic scene. And it's like you're reading it and you're like, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. The smart one's running away. The dumb pretty boy is drawing his swords and he's striking a nice pose because he wants to impress the godchild. And he's like, oh, here we go.
Oh, it was great.
Yeah, this is exactly what they would do. And yeah, I was hoping there wouldn't be some kind of heroic moment when he rushes in and they become, they put on their superhero capes. But so yeah, that was great.
Yeah, no superhero capes.
Yeah.
I also liked the kind of pretzel of travel. They kept like, we're going to go here, and they turn around, and meanwhile they're being tracked, and they don't know, and those people are just a little bit behind. And then so when they decided to change directions and head where we knew the slaver was, I was like, oh no, here we go. And so it was really cool to see them that keep changing directions, and you, because you're the reader, you know what the other characters are doing, and you know they're about to come to a head, just like with the shapeshifters and everything. And so you're always anticipating how is that going to come out? Are they going to just miss each other again? How is that going to happen? But
And we laugh about the cat and the cat followers and everything, but I thought that was a really important moment for Morgan, because he starts to realize maybe he shouldn't use these. Maybe he has to be a little bit more careful with how he uses his abilities. That was pretty hilarious.
yeah.
Yeah, a moment of childish rage on the part of the swordsman, and unforeseen repercussions afterwards, and of course people will follow any crazy thing.
Yeah, and I felt bad for laughing, but it was, it was funny, but I felt like I shouldn't be laughing about it. So, John, final thoughts. What did you think? What were your impressions? Or what were your thoughts on it?
Well, I did enjoy it. I struggled between a 3-star and a 4-star rating. I did kind of settle on a 3-star. I did actually struggle a little bit, kind of maybe not following the plot, but being invested in the plot and the characters. But I really did like the world building, how the the magic's based off of the delusion. So that part of it I did really like. Just for me, I did struggle a little bit with the characters.
Yolene, what did you think?
I really liked it. I liked that I couldn't really predict anything. So in the end, I would have given it 4 out of 5 stars. I don't give star ratings, so but if I would, probably 4 out of 5. Because it was so unique. I really liked that part of it, and in the end, I could really be involved with the characters and feel for them, even though I knew they are terrible people. And that struggle, I always like it, and I have something like that.
Yeah. Same here, 4 out of 5 stars. And for almost the same reasons that Yolene said, I'm a very character-driven reader, and I would have liked to have more of the characters here. By the end, though, I really felt invested. I think Morgan was really a catalyst for that. Once he joined the group, it really changed the dynamic of the trio, and having all these other characters kind of all after the same goal. And I liked that and how it all came to a head in the end. The uniqueness of the story, 5 out of 5. I mean, I'd never read anything like that. And the magic system was so different. And yes, it was set on a set of rules, but the rules were dictated by the person and their own delusions, which made each magic for each person so different. And I really liked it. And it was always consistent for them, but not consistent for the world. And so you never got bored. Every time you met a new character, there was always going to be something unique about them. The one thing that the German thing I thought was great. I didn't have a problem with it, but it did make it a little bit complicated for understanding the different types of I can't even pronounce the word that they are. the different kinds of delusional people. So, but I appreciate the glossary. So the glossary in the back really helped me with that. Is like what is a Hossam brand? And so you okay, yeah, well that makes sense. She's obviously using fire. Okay, so sometimes I felt stupid that I didn't know what it was. But like the sociopaths seem to be the biggest type. Like the most of the characters in the book you were following had some form of that sociopath power, and so when a new like the shapeshifters and all those came in, I was like, okay, what is that? The person, Asena, right? You kind of get an idea that she's like a decaying person, that she's half dead. Is she a zombie? What is she? And I liked that like mystery of not always knowing what they were. But then later on in the story, that word would come up and I'd be like, what is that thing again? And I'd have to go to the glossary and, okay, it's just like Asena. She's like half dead. But anyway, that was the only thing that I struggled with. But I really liked it. I really enjoyed it. It was good. I really am looking forward to the next book for sure.
Yeah, this definitely lived up to expectations hearing so much about it. And in the beginning of the book, you mentioned sometimes it's funner to not look at there's a glossary, but sometimes it's funner to not, just to kind of.
Yeah.
So I made it a point to not look at the glossary until
Yeah,
I was finished.
as a reader, and I read a ton of fantasy, I never look at the glossaries. If there's a map, I skip it. If there's like lists of characters and words, I'm like, skip it. As to me, the point is the discovery. I mean, that's why I'm reading, right? That's why I'm reading fantasies. I want to discover, and the idea is, and my hope was, if I did my job right, if I wrote the book well, you didn't need it. Now that doesn't mean I succeeded. That was the goal. I was like, here's the glossary in case I fucked up. But like my hope was like you shouldn't need it. Whether that's the case, I don't know. Like some people are all over the glossary, and maybe it's just also like different people read differently or are looking for different things. But that was the plan.
Took me a minute to kind of get how the world works and their abilities and everything, but at the end, I understood what was happening. And after I finished the book and I did look at the glossary, it's like there was a lot to this world. And reading it, but it's not. It doesn't back a truck up and dump it on you. It's steady. It's a trickle, but by the end, there's just big world and all these abilities.
A ton of stuff in that glossary that didn't even make it into the first book. There's stuff in there that I don't think it even made it into the second book. And then there's the standalone. There's even more stuff going on over there. Each time I put a glossary in, just in case. But, a fair amount of world building went into making that all sort of hopefully work.
And so we are reading Mirror's Truth, and I think we talked about the dates, but would you be able to meet us for that discussion as well?
Yeah, for sure.
So, can you give us a preview for it? What can we expect? Can you tease us?
Yeah, I don't want to give too much away. Like I said, it's more focused on the trio. They are sort of like the driving force for the second book. You'll see a bunch of other familiar characters as well, of course. The story is mental, and Benedict will make sense in the end.
Okay.
Excited.
Yeah, I'm really excited. Really excited for it. So thanks for joining us, Michael. I know you're busy and you have a life of your own, so thanks for taking the time out of your day to sit and chat with us about Beyond Redemption.
Yeah, thanks for
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks for having me.
So thanks everybody who watched. If you want to join us reading Mirror's Truth, just let us know and we'll help you get started. But that is next month. I can find the date really quick, but it's on our calendar. And of course, Slowly Read. Thanks again to Slowly Read for doing the review that introduced me to the book, and has a fantastic Grimdark channel. He introduced me to Grimdark and all these awesome books that I'm growing to really love. So a lot of credit goes to him
for putting this book up for the book of the month, because I enjoyed it. I did.
Well, it's
and
been
I
on my
wouldn't
list.
have read it.
No.
It sounded too weird, but it was so good.
That's why I wanted to read it, because it sounded so bonkers that it's like I have to find out about this. So I've been wanting to read it for a long time, and I wanted to squeeze in both books. That was a goal. Is I wanted to read both. I didn't want to just read one and then. So, thankfully, we found some time.
The plan is always to, with every fantasy book that I write, or even science fiction, I want to do something a little different. I want to push something somewhere a little bit new. Is always the plan.
Do you plan to write other genres?
Yeah. So I've got one science fiction book out there. It's mostly, I'd call it cyberpunk. I've got a horror novel tickling around in the back of my brain. I'm kind of nervous about writing it just because everyone kind of expects fantasy from me, and I'm not sure how much people are willing to genre hop, and I like being able to make mortgage payments, so I might play it a little safer for a little while, and stay with the fantasy and science fiction stuff. We'll see.
I'll read it.
I will say that a lot of people who enjoy grimdark fantasy, it's a very thin line between that and horror, and I think you might find a lot of fans of Beyond Redemption would pick up your horror novel, especially because you do such a great job with the dark themes within that book.
Hope so.
Yeah, I
That's
agree. I
that.
think it's really close. Cool. Well, thanks everybody for coming by. Thanks everyone in the chat for stopping by too. If, like I said, if you want to join us next month for the Mirror's Truth discussion, let us know and we'll help you get started. So thanks again, everybody, and thanks again, Michael, John, Stacy, and Yolene. Always a pleasure to chat. So we will hopefully see you guys next month.
Cool.
All right.
Thanks
you,
for
guys.
having me.
Bye.
Bye.